Hey everybody, welcome back to our deep dive into the book of Luke. Today we are looking at Luke chapter 8, verses 22 to 25. It's a very short story that takes place after Jesus has been explaining what it means to follow him, to be his disciple. And now we move into a series of stories that demonstrate why we should put our trust in Jesus. This particular story is a very short one, it's a very well-known one. Jesus and his disciples get in a boat. They're going across the Sea of Galilee to the other side. Jesus goes down into the stern and falls asleep. While he's asleep, this raging tempest storm comes out of nowhere and starts rocking the boat, and the boat starts overflowing with water. The disciples obviously panic. They run down into the stern and wake Jesus up and say, wake up, the storm is destroying all of us. And so Jesus calmly gets up, he goes out, he rebukes the wind and the waves, everything calms down. And he asks his disciples, where is your faith? And then they reply, who is this that he can speak to the wind and waves, and the wind and waves obey him? That's the end of our story. Why I love this story is because it has so many hyperlinks to other parts of the Bible. So this story may spark a bunch of different ideas of how God uses nature. We see Jesus' power over nature in various forms. We see Jesus in another passage walk on top of the water. But we know especially that the pictures of God in the Old Testament show God being able to control the weather. Particularly where this is poignant is that in the Jewish mind in Jesus' day, the water or the sea, the ocean, was known as the realm of chaos. It was where God's presence was thought to be absent. This is the very reason why Jonah, when he was commissioned by God to go preach to the Ninevites, decided to get on a boat and sail as far away as he could on the sea. Because in his mind, he thought, well, God surely can't get me while I'm on the sea, because this is where the chaos rules and reigns, and God has no power here. And so ancient Hebrew thinking was that the sea was a place of chaos, of destruction, of death. We see this particularly in Exodus chapter 14, that as God's people are fleeing Egypt, after God has brought the 10 plagues onto the Egyptians, they are now walking through the wilderness, and they've come to a sea of water, and Pharaoh has changed his mind, and he wants to get his slaves back, so he pursues the Israelites into the desert. And so they are hemmed in by a giant sea in front of them, and an oncoming scary Egyptian army behind them, and God's people start to panic. They think, we're doomed. We should have just stayed in Egypt. What are we doing here? We're all going to die, because there's no way through the chaos waters, and we can't go back either. And so then we have this scene in Exodus 14, reading verses 21 and 22, where it says, Moses stretches out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, the waters part, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and a wall of water on their left. And so here is this picture of the people coming to the chaos waters, and yet God, with a word, speaks order into chaos. He commands the wind to come, and the wind parts the sea into two different walls so the people can walk through safely on dry ground. This image that God can rule over the chaos waters gets picked up in several other biblical passages. In Psalm 107, for example, that passage is talking about how God's people are now being brought back after the exile. And he describes all these people being brought in from different places and how they got to experience God even though they're trying to run away from him. In Psalm 107, verses 23 to 30 say this: "Some went out on the sea in ships, their merchants on the mighty waters. They saw the works of the Lord, his wonderful deeds in the deep. For he spoke and stirred up a tempest that lifted high the waves. They mounted up to the heavens and went down to the depths. In their peril, their courage melted away. They reeled and staggered like drunkards. They were at their wits' end. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. Then they were glad and grew calm, and he guided them to their desired haven." It's this picture that only God, the God of the Old Testament, is able to control the chaos waters. And we see this similarly in the book of Jonah, when Jonah tries to get away from God, and God stirs up this mighty storm, and the sailors are panicking. Meanwhile, Jonah is where? Asleep in the stern, and he gets woken up, and they're saying, "Do something, call on your God." And Jonah's like, "I know what this is about. This is about me. Just throw me overboard, and the waters will be calm again, because God is the one that has stirred up the sea and the wind and the waves." And so there's this recognition that this was only something that God was able to do. And so, of course, you're a disciple, you're in the boat, the waves are rocking and rolling, they're pouring in. It's saying, the Greek words say that the boat is being overwhelmed. They're being drowned slowly because of this water. And yet Jesus comes out calmly, speaks a word, and everything is back to calm and peaceful. And he uses this as a springboard to teach them a lesson about faith. That didn't you know I was with you? You have nothing to be afraid of in the middle of this storm. And the disciples' reaction is very telling, because they say, "Who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him?" Their minds cannot fathom a category of a human being that is able to do that, to control the sea, the chaos waters, to control the wind and the waves. Only God is able to do that. And so you start to see them wrestling with this understanding of, who is Jesus? We thought he was this one thing, a special teacher or prophet maybe, but now he's defying our expectations. He's something more, because only God can do what Jesus just did. Even Moses couldn't do it himself. It was God through Moses that was doing it. But here Jesus speaks and the waters are calm. I love how one of biblical scholars puts this. He says that this section begins a series of miracles that appear to have a threefold function. First, they drive home the message of who Jesus really is for the disciples, that what God is able to do is now attributed to Jesus. So Jesus can do the same things that God can do. So he's more than a teacher or a prophet. Secondly, this unit demonstrates the authority that Jesus possesses. This account shows them how great Jesus is and what it means that he exercises authority over these forces that come up to destroy them. And to show them that when one is allied to Jesus, these forces can ultimately be overcome. There is no enemy too great for Jesus. And finally, the account is designed for disciples to realize that, however great the peril, Jesus is aware and able to deliver. It may be deliverance through a trial rather than from it, but one is to apply faith in these kinds of situations. Thus, the story is about allowing us to place our trust in Jesus. This is the lesson of discipleship that the stilling of the storm teaches. That without a Christology that recognizes Jesus' authority, there can be no real hope in him. For otherwise, the hostile waves in life will pull us down and there's nowhere to turn. The calming of the waves can only come from the one who has power to restore order. So Luke uses this as the first of a series of stories that is meant to draw us to put our trust in Jesus and what it means to follow him, that he is the one who has ultimate authority. which leaves us with the question, have we done that? I'll leave you with that, and we'll see you next time. Bye.